Welcome to Beyond the Office. I'm your host, Bill Keller, and on today's episode, we have Dan Rice, CFO of Paul B. Zimmerman Incorporated, and also he is the Vice President of Manufacturing Services. Dan, it's great to have you on the show today.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you on, and in today's show, we're really going to dive in with Dan. Paul B. Zimmerman's has been in business for over 75 years now. Is that correct?
That is right. Yep.
And you're in a lot of different industries. Can you tell us, for those who are not familiar with Paul B. Zimmerman's, what do you guys do, and to give them an idea of what industries you're in and what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. So this was a family company. Paul B. Zimmerman was the founder back in the 1940s, and he started with a repair shop here in Lancaster on Wood Corner Road. And as he was doing car repairs and things like that, he started stocking hardware, and that kind of evolved into a hardware store. And that's what most people know Paul B. Zimmerman for, is the Paul B. hardware stores. We have a large hardware store here in Lidditz on the border of Ephrata and Lidditz, and have expanded into two other retail stores. But as they got into the second generation, Paul had 6 sons that got involved in the business, and lots of different ideas and ventures that they got involved into. So they laser cutting. So they got into the metal fab world. They also branched into powder coating metal products. Also, as an offshoot of the hardware store, they got involved in the wholesale business in ag and industrial parts. So kind of our current structure, our portfolio of companies, we have the hardware stores, we have our wholesale business in ag and industrial parts, and then we have our manufacturing services, which I give executive oversight to, which covers our metal fab and our powder coating. And then we have our line of crop care sprayers.
Well, they're a manufacturing powerhouse, and there is no better hardware store, I believe, any place across the country. It is amazing. So in my previous career, I used to own a manufacturing company, and it was the stop we made pretty much every day, because it is where you go if you need to fix something. So with that off the plate, with that table, so after 75 years, you guys kind of ventured into, with us, using global remote staff. And I was just curious, what was your thought process? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so that kind of starts with me personally, going back to the start of my career about 19 years ago in public accounting. I started working for KPMG, as a Big Four public accounting firm. And at that time in early 2000s, we were actually setting up an office in Bangalore, India, to utilize professionals from there in some of the accounting and audit work that we were engaged with. And I think part of this just emerged from a trend of, you have the call centers in the late 90s, introducing the concept of outsourcing professional work, knowledge work, that type of thing. And, the accounting industry looking for ways to stay competitive, saw that, in India, you've got well-educated people, a large, diverse labor pool. So a lot of new resources to pull from. And so it was not a foreign concept to me to think about outsourcing professional work. Again, going back to the beginning of my career, I also had the privilege of working overseas in some developing country contexts. And I think through that experience, just really recognized that there are talented people all over this world. And, as you engage with people in different contexts and countries, you just develop an appreciation that we're all the same, that we desire the same things. And there's language and cultural barriers, but you can break those down quickly, I think, and really connect the human level with people from many different backgrounds. So, out of my personal experience and exposure, I wasn't afraid of that. As I think, many people who haven't had those experiences may feel a little bit of apprehension, like how is this going to work? And no idea how you work with people, on the other side of the globe. So, but bringing it back home to the business decision, why we started exploring this, it was a recognition of, again, I think there are tasks in accounting that can be somewhat mundane, and what we've seen in sort of a pattern is a lot of turnover in those types of positions, and turnover creates costs. It's a challenge to find talent. I think recognizing the labor pool is shrinking, and so it's just another way to, I think, access a larger labor market. We wanted to actually view this as a longer term strategy, recognizing those labor shortages, that if we can successfully do this, then it gives us some competitive advantage, a way to keep costs down and access a larger labor pool.
That's fantastic. I mean, as far as you mentioned so many different things there, and working overseas, and I think I know you as far as I know Paul B. Zimmerman's and the company. You guys want to take care of your employees, and I've seen that also as you've tried to look out for your overseas employees, and making sure that how are they taken care of? Are they being paid well? Are they being paid fairly? And trying to make sure that this isn't somebody taking advantage of another person. It's you working together so everybody moves forward. And you're talking about everybody has kind of the same dreams and goals. Everybody wants to take care of their family. They want to be successful. They want to move forward. And I've seen how you've tried to take care of that, not only for your domestic employees, but also for people overseas. And so I appreciate that. And a lot of what you're seeing, you were talking about, is what we're seeing in the marketplace. There is a shrinking labor pool. Not everybody's cut out to this, to do accounting work. And, I see for us that a lot of people who were doing this type of bookkeeping or accounting work, maybe at the lower to medium level, are trying to get pushed into a different area, perhaps. A lot of people are moving out of accounting and moving into, computers or data analytics or other things. What else are you seeing, other trends? How is the labor force, since you've been in the industry for over 19 years, how have things changed in your world? What have you seen, and where do you see it headed?
Yeah, well, certainly technology continues to be rapidly evolving landscape and making our jobs easier. Some of the mundane tasks that we're just moving more into the technology that allows us to, I think, engage that higher level work. That when I graduated from college and got my CPA license and all that, I hated that I had to manually add up things on a piece of paper, and it's I didn't spend all this money to do this. I wanted to do some more exciting work. Yeah, I think technology continues to evolve and make our jobs less manual, more automated. So that's a trend. I think with the tightening labor market, people are more selective on the jobs they want to do. And again, they have the options available to them to, if they don't like it here, they'll go somewhere else. And so, it's one of those things that we have to contend with as a business. It's not bad. It's good that people have options and choices, but we have, essential functions that we have to fill. And I think for us too, we look at it as, there are things that we do that add value to the customer, and then there are things that we do that don't add value to the customer, frankly. And accounting is one of those things that customers don't really care about too much. And whether how we do our accounts payable or accounts receivable and things like that, they care that we do that efficiently, because that means that we're cost effective and we can keep our costs in control for those customers. So that's how we look at it as a business. We want to focus on the things that add value to our customers and be as efficient and as cost effective on the things that don't.
And that's a great lean manufacturing principle. Basically anything that the customer is not willing to pay for is waste. And so just like you talked about, how do we reduce their costs on things that people don't want to pay for, and then you can focus more on those value added areas and the places where you can really bring this superior value to your clients and customers. And I've seen you guys do that, so that's awesome. As far as what has been your experience as you brought on this overseas team member? What are some of the good things, some of the bad things? What have you seen that people might find interesting that maybe you weren't even expecting?
Yeah, so I was going into this expecting we would fail pretty quickly, and I kind of
that's not good.
I tend to approach things from prepare for the worst and hope for the best, and knowing that this is more of a long-term strategy. I wasn't expecting things to go particularly well the first time, and I was prepared for that personally. Just I saw it as an opportunity to learn, and I'm not afraid of failure. That it's our greatest teacher, and so I looked at it as sort of this long game of what if it does fail, what are we going to learn from this experience? And because ultimately I do believe in the strategy and in terms of overcoming some of the challenges ahead of us from a labor market standpoint. So I was kind of surprised actually that it's gone as well as it has.
Well, I love to hear that. That's awesome. But I also appreciate the philosophy behind that you're talking about, because a lot of times I think people assume that it's going to go too well, right? And then it doesn't meet their expectations. So, I think you probably took the right tack there, but I'm certainly glad that it's worked out better than you had anticipated. That's awesome.
I mean, I'm generally a positive person, so I wasn't necessarily planning for it to fail, but I wouldn't have been surprised, I guess. Just knowing that, this is a new endeavor. The people on my team have not been used to working with people overseas, and I think there's that very human element of some apprehension about how do I interact with this person, how do I even understand. There are the opportunities for miscommunication and just misunderstanding, whether that's language or cultural barriers. But I was prepared to coach our team through that, and having worked overseas, kind of felt comfortable with that. I think there are inherent challenges to working with someone remotely, even if they're here in the U.S. It's not the same as working with someone in the office where you can just stop by and have a quick chat about whatever it is going on. It's a little harder to build that personal rapport with someone who's working remotely. So there are those inherent challenges that create some downside. It's not, I wouldn't say it's the solution for everything. We certainly see some value in having staff here, a full team here connecting, and so it's kind of weighing the benefits against some of those disadvantages. We've only had one person currently that we've been working with overseas remote, and yeah, he's worked out really well. Again, I try to coach my staff and from the beginning, treating him as one of our employees. It's as if any one of us were working on the team. He's part of our staff, and we treat him as such. You have communication issues with other people on staff, you can work through those things, and yeah, that's just our general approach to it. So,
and that's what we found in general, basically, is incorporating them as part of your team is the best thing that you can do. And that might sound, well, of course, but for a lot of times people, they're 10,000 miles away and they send them work and just let them do their work. They send it back, and there's not really that inclusion. And so I appreciate that, because I believe that's really what's going to set it apart, from could be an average experience to moving it to awesome and to great, is that inclusion. And so I appreciate that. And I've seen that with other people that other clients and other people we work with. The more that they include them is just, they just happen to be a team member that's 10,000 miles away. If you had another remote employee, how would you include them? And so I appreciate that about you guys. And that is one of the things that I would really recommend for most people is think about be very intentional. And some things you talked about is it's a little harder to make some of those connections, and it requires more intentionality, whether that's, overseas or whether that's, 100 miles away in another town. If you have that intentionality to incorporate them in your team, I think that's really going to go a long way to making sure that remote work, whether domestic or international, is working for you. So I'm curious because for those of you who might not be aware, you're a Christian-based company. You come from a plain Mennonite background, and so for a lot of people, this is very innovative. And just curious how you did the kind of like the incorporation. Did you receive any pushback from your staff? You talked about coaching your staff. What was that like to bring somebody on board? I think for a lot of people, that's a worry that they have. How are my employees going to feel about this? Do they feel threatened? How do we overcome that? What does that look like in your world, and how were you able to incorporate them?
I think you have to navigate some of that. When I did this, I was in the controller position and had a lot of support from leadership, which would have been the CFO here, Roger. So he was very supportive of this and understood the strategic implications. And just again, from a business perspective, I think anytime you talk about whether it's technology or outsourcing, those concepts can feel a little bit fearful. But when you begin to break it down to people that there's lots of parts of your job that you don't really like doing, and we see that you could do more effective work, like the things that really help you come alive in your talents and gifts. I think that's the way that we kind of pitch it to people, is that this allows them to function in things that they more enjoy. We're not taking something away, but as a growing business, we're looking for ways to grow effectively. And everyone knows there's a tight labor market and there's turnover, and the headache that causes, people feel very tangibly. Yeah, that's kind of how we pitched it. We had looked at two positions, I think, for this. So one was for accounts payable, and we ended up not choosing an overseas staff person for that. And that was partly driven by, I couldn't really get the buy-in with my accounts payable supervisor. And that's one of the challenges we're working through, and recognizing he had a lot on his plate. And I think there is an investment of time and energy into something like this that goes a little bit above and beyond just training someone here. It introduces different dynamics. So I have to assess the temperature, how much to push my staff, and
it's a new way to work, and it does require a different skill set. And so for many people, they go, hey, I don't want to do that, right? And and sometimes they will push back and don't want to do that until they find out they don't have other opportunity, other options at the moment. We're not finding the people that you need. Maybe you want somebody right next to you, but if we can't find them, it's not going to work. So then we're going to need to move on to a different strategy. And so, I appreciate that, that to really make this work, especially in the beginning, you really need that champion like you to push this forward, to be able to understand that maybe it's not going to work right, the first time, or, maybe it's going to take longer than we anticipated. You guys have, I think, 400 employees or so, somewhere in that general vicinity. And so for many people, especially an organization your size, I appreciate that you're taking the basically testing. Okay, let's what is the strategy for the future? You're taking the long view and really going, okay, what are we going to do for the future? Okay, maybe this isn't a strategy we're going to employ across, all our teams, and we're, going to just roll this out and we're going to have 50 people in here. And not that I think that would work for a manufacturing company of your size. It's, you need people on the ground. This is, just very strategic. Okay, we have a job here. And I think that something that I heard you talk about is, can we help our employees to be working on more valuable tasks? I heard Alex Hermosi talk about this the other day. He says, you're executing at a level 10 on a level 2 opportunity. And so you can have people that, who do a fantastic job at this, but the reality is that's not going to get them where they want to go and where you want them to go as an organization, because just the opportunity and the value is just not there. And so from my perspective, it's this combination of using various different resources in ways that benefit everybody, to be able to move everybody up and allow them more opportunities to move to success. So I'm curious, we talked a little bit and touched on technology, but with AI really coming on board, what are you seeing and how do you see AI affecting the accounting and the business, and what do you see that doing, especially from a business and also a manufacturing side? How do you see this coming on board, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, we've been experimenting with AI, the past year and a half, in small bites. I'd say in certain individuals, we haven't until recently launched anything organization-wide. More recently, we operate in the Google workspace, so testing out Google's Gemini AI. So from my personal work experience, I've found it to be very useful in certain cases where if I'm needing to approach a creative project or something like that, getting a starting point. And yeah, I'd say it's definitely not the end product, but it gets you started in a way that saves a lot of time and energy and research. And then for me also, as a spreadsheet nerd, I develop pretty complex formulas in my spreadsheets because I can't code. So I have to lean on just doing very complicated things with my spreadsheets to get them to automate things that I want automated or analyze efficiently. So it helps me a lot with just figuring out what the formula needs to be. And it can take a process that, it took me 2 hours before down to like 10 minutes. So it saves me a lot of time in that regard. I think the obvious answers right now are in creating documents and word-based documents, coding, and like I said, for me personally, spreadsheet formulas. So I've seen a lot of value there. I think it's going to take a lot more intentionality to figure out the other ways that AI is going to apply, into manufacturing. And there's lots of talk and buzz about it. And I think there's a lot of potential there. It's still so new, it feels like. And I think like with anything, there's the buzz and then there's the practical figuring out how to make this work in your business processes. I just read an article from the Wall Street Journal that talked about like how spreadsheets are actually holding back AI for a lot of people. So accounting functions and things like that are heavily reliant on their spreadsheets and continue to do so because it creates a very easy, people are very familiar with spreadsheets and very easy way to look at your data, analyze it. But spreadsheets have the inherent problem of the single source of truth. And so you get people with different versions of spreadsheets across the organization. And then the problem that can create if you feed that into AI models, sort of the garbage in, garbage out principle. So it was an interesting article, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for sure. It still feels a little bit young, and we're kind of getting over some of the initial hype and getting more into practically figuring out how this is going to affect us.
So I'm curious on the AI space. Are you in the camp that this is going to save you a whole bunch of time, or is it just going to shift your work into other things? Are you going to spend it are you going to go, hey, I only have 20 hours of work this week instead of 50 or 60, whatever you're doing? Or is it going to say okay, now I still have 50 hours worth of work, but I'm getting either a lot more done or I'm getting different things done? How do you see this playing out? Because I think that's what a lot of people are trying to figure out.
I'm always thinking about growth in the future, so I never seem to have enough time. So the more efficient I can make things that are not fun, that gives me more time to think about strategic planning and technology implementation, things like that that are gonna drive us forward for growth. So we're a business that wants to continue to grow, and I think if you're growing, then you're not ever thinking about, well, we can just call it quits at noon today.
You're not just coasting. I don't think that's your philosophy. So, especially not the philosophy there at Paul B. So, as we kind of bring this to a close, I'm curious, what advice would you give an organization that's considering bringing on overseas staff? What are some of the tips that you would give them?
Yeah, I think like we said before, it is important to view them as a part of your team and think intentionally about how you're going to incorporate them as part of the team. We've certainly had mishaps with that. It is a challenge when you're working with someone remote, when a lot of our people do work remotely, a couple of days a week, but they're in the office as well. So you don't have that regular interface with someone who's 100% remote. So being intentional about incorporating them as part of your team, recognize there will be language and cultural things to navigate, those challenges that go inherent with someone working with someone overseas. But it's an opportunity to stretch our emotional intelligence, also to grow as individuals, I think, in figuring out how to work effectively with someone who comes from a different background from us. And yeah, I think those would be kind of the key pieces of advice I would give.
Well, that's great advice, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your openness to trying something new. And if we were all open to that, and because I believe that's going to be the secret to success, not necessarily using global staff necessarily in the future, but being open to change, because that's really the only thing we know that's a kind of a constant. There's going to be this constant change, especially with AI, that's going to be increasing ever faster. And so, are you prepared for that? How are you stretching yourself as an organization, as a business? When was the last time you tried something for the first time? Right? And so I appreciate that. And so it's great advice. And I really appreciate your time today. It's great catching up with you and getting to just pick your brain about everything remote, AI, and business, and where you guys are headed. And wish you 75 years more success. And so from Beyond the Office, thanks for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you next time.